Hey star-crossed souls, ready to risk everything for a love no law can allow. In the shadowed forests where ancient bloodlines draw battle lines in silver and stone, two hearts beat as one, even as their packs demand they tear each other apart. When duty wars with desire, and every stolen kiss could ignite a war, some loves burn so bright they'll either forge a new destiny or destroy everything in their flames. Some loves are meant to be hidden in the shadows, but can they survive the light? Chapter 1. The scent hit Lyra Nightshade like a physical blow, stopping her mid-stride on the forest path. Rich, wild, intoxicating, nothing like the familiar musk of her Shadowmoon pack. This was different. Dangerous. Enemy. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her skin, caught between territorial aggression and something far more primal. Something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch in her throat. Get back to the den, Lyra. The command came from Marcus, her pack's beta, and the wolf she was supposed to mate by the next full moon. His golden eyes flashed with protective fury as he stepped between her and the source of that devastating scent. Bloodfang wolves have crossed into our territory. Bloodfang. The name sent ice through her veins even as heat pooled low in her belly. For 3 centuries, the Shadowmoon and Bloodfang packs had been locked in a blood feud so ancient that most had forgotten what started it. All that mattered was the law written in pain and loss. Never trust. Never forgive. Never love. But as Lyra's enhanced hearing picked up the sound of approaching footsteps, every instinct screamed that she should run toward the danger, not away from it. I said go. Marcus's voice carried the weight of his rank, but Lyra was an alpha's daughter. She submitted to no one except her father, and even then, only when it suited her. I can handle myself, she shot back, her own wolf rising to the challenge. The silver pendant at her throat, carved with the Shadowmoon sigil, began to warm against her skin, responding to her shift in emotion. That's when he stepped into the clearing. Tall and broad-shouldered, with midnight black hair that caught the filtered moonlight streaming through the canopy above. His skin held the warm olive tone of the Mediterranean bloodline that ran through the Bloodfang pack, and when his eyes met hers across the 20 feet of forest floor between them, Lyra forgot how to breathe. They were the deep green of ancient forests, flecked with gold that seemed to burn with inner fire. And in them, she saw the same shock of recognition that was currently turning her world upside down.
Mate.
The word whispered through her consciousness like a prayer and a curse combined. The wolf inside her threw back her head and howled with joy, while the human part of her mind reeled in horror. This couldn't be happening. Not with him. Not with a Bloodfang. Well. His voice was like aged whiskey and smoke, rolling over her in waves that made her shiver despite the warm night air. Lyra Nightshade. I was wondering when we'd finally meet properly. You know who I am? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and she cursed herself for the breathless quality in her voice. A slow smile curved his lips she found herself staring at with entirely inappropriate fascination. Hard not to. You're famous even in enemy territory. The Shadowmoon princess who turns down every suitor and fights like a warrior born. Heat flooded her cheeks. And you are Dante Romano, future alpha of the Bloodfang pack. He took a step closer, and that intoxicating scent wrapped around her like silk. And, apparently, completely screwed. The crude honesty in his words made her laugh despite everything. That makes 2 of us. Marcus snarled, his wolf pushing close to the surface. Step away from her, Bloodfang scum. She's already promised to another. Dante's expression darkened, and for a moment, Lyra caught a glimpse of the predator that lurked beneath his controlled exterior. Is that so, princess? The endearment should have annoyed her. Instead, it sent liquid fire racing through her veins. I make my own choices, she said, lifting her chin in defiance. Good to know. Dante's eyes never left hers as he addressed Marcus. Tell me, Beta, does your promised mate always wander so far from packlands? Alone? At night?
She's not alone, Marcus snapped.
No, she's not. Dante's voice dropped to a dangerous purr. She's with her mate. The word hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus lunged forward with a roar of rage, his partial shift rippling through his frame as claws extended from his fingertips. Stop. Lyra threw herself between them, her own wolf surging to protect what was hers, even though she couldn't afford to claim him. The force of her shift sent power crackling through the air, making both males freeze. This solves nothing. It would solve everything, Marcus growled, but he forced his wolf back under control. His death would start a war neither pack can afford, Lyra finished. She turned to face Dante, who watched her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. You need to leave. Now.
Do I?
He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Close enough to see the silver flecks in his green eyes. Or, do I need to claim what's mine? The words sent a shockwave through her system. Every cell in her body screamed yes, but her mind knew better. I'm not yours to claim. Aren't you? His voice was soft, dangerous. Tell me, Lyra Nightshade, daughter of the Alpha who killed my grandfather in cold blood, tell me you don't feel this pull between us. Tell me your wolf isn't crying out for mine right now. She couldn't. The mating bond thrummed between them like a living thing, growing stronger with every heartbeat, every breath. It was beautiful and terrible and absolutely impossible. It doesn't matter what I feel, she whispered, hating the way her voice shook. You know what happened the last time our bloodlines tried to unite? Dante's expression sobered. The Crimson Night Massacre. 43 wolves dead because two star-crossed mates thought love could conquer centuries of hate. Love didn't save them. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. It destroyed them and everyone they cared about. So we do nothing? Dante's hand lifted as if to touch her face, then dropped back to his side. We pretend this bond doesn't exist? Marry other wolves and spend the rest of our lives wondering what if. The pain in his voice nearly undid her. We don't have a choice. There's always a choice, princess. He stepped back, but his eyes held hers with magnetic force. The question is whether we're brave enough to make it. Before she could respond, the sound of approaching wolves echoed through the forest. Multiple scents moving fast. Both packs had sent out search parties. They're coming, Marcus said urgently. We need to go.
Now.
Dante nodded grimly. This isn't over, Lyra. Yes, it is. But even as she said the words, she knew she was lying. Nothing would ever be over between them. The bond that had snapped into place the moment their eyes met was permanent, unbreakable, and completely forbidden. As Dante melted back into the shadows with the fluid grace of his wolf, Lyra pressed a hand to her chest where her heart hammered against her ribs. The silver pendant felt suddenly heavy against her skin, a cold reminder of her duty, her heritage, her destiny. A destiny that had just become infinitely more complicated. Lyra. Her father's voice boomed through the trees, followed by the thunder of paws on forest floor. Within seconds, Alpha Connor Nightshade burst into the clearing in his massive wolf form, flanked by 6-pack warriors. The sight of her father should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like the walls of a prison closing in around her. What have I done? She thought as she prepared to face questions she couldn't answer about a connection she couldn't deny. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. She'd found her other half in the one person she could never have. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the clearing, Dante Romano was facing the same impossible reality. Chapter 2. Explain. Alpha Connor Nightshade's voice could have frozen hell itself as he loomed over his daughter in the privacy of his den. His massive frame. Even in human form, he stood nearly 7 feet tall, blocked out most of the firelight, casting Lyra in shadow. She'd managed to shower and change into clean clothes, but she couldn't wash away the lingering scent of pine and leather that clung to her skin. Dante's scent. The one her father's wolf nose would detect the moment he got close enough. There's nothing to explain, Dad. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. I was patrolling the borders like I always do. With Marcus. His golden eyes, so similar to her own, pinned her in place. Who tells me you encountered bloodfang wolves? Plural. Lyra's pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. One wolf. He retreated when he realized he'd crossed into our territory. Connor's eyebrows rose. Marcus said there were at least 3 different scents. Damn Marcus and his thorough reporting. I don't know what he smelled. I only saw one. The lie hung between them, and Lyra watched her father's nostrils flare slightly. She held her breath, praying he wouldn't detect the deception. Or worse, the mating bond that even now thrummed through her veins like liquid electricity. Lyra. Connor's voice gentled, and he reached out to cup her face in his massive hands. You know you can tell me anything, right? No matter what it is. The tenderness in his voice nearly broke her. This was the man who'd taught her to shift, to hunt, to lead. Who'd held her through nightmares and celebrated her victories. Who'd trusted her with pack secrets and groomed her to be his second in command. And she was lying to his face about the most dangerous thing that could possibly happen to their pack. I know, Dad. She leaned into his touch, memorizing the comfort of it. Because when the truth eventually came out, and it would, she might lose this forever. I'm just tired. It's been a long night. Connor studied her face for another long moment, then nodded slowly. Go get some rest. But Lyra? His expression hardened again. I'm doubling patrols on the southern border. And you're not to go out alone anymore. Not until we know what the Bloodfangs are planning. What do you mean, what they're planning? Intel suggests they're mobilizing. New wolves joining their ranks, increased activity along their borders. Some think they're preparing for war. His jaw clenched. After 300 years of uneasy peace, Salvatore Romano might finally be ready to finish what his ancestors started. Lyra's blood turned to ice. Salvatore Romano, Dante's father. The alpha who'd reportedly become more ruthless and power-hungry with each passing year. If he was truly preparing for war. Dad, what if there was another way? Instead of fighting, I mean. Connor's laugh was bitter. Like what? Peace treaties? We tried that once, remember? The Hartwell Accords of 1847 lasted exactly 3 months before they massacred an entire pack of our allies. His expression darkened. There is no peace with the Bloodfangs, Lyra. Only victory or death. The finality in his voice made her stomach clench. And if someone wanted to try anyway, hypothetically, Connor's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Anyone stupid enough to trust a Bloodfang would be considered a traitor to the pack. And traitors. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what happened to traitors. Exile. Or worse. I understand, Lyra whispered. Good. Now, get some sleep. Your mating ceremony with Marcus is in 2 weeks, and there's still a lot to prepare. Connor kissed her forehead, then headed for the door. Oh, and Lyra? Marcus mentioned you seemed distracted tonight. Whatever's bothering you, work it out. A strong pack needs strong leadership, and that includes strong partnerships. The door closed behind him with quiet finality, leaving Lyra alone with her racing thoughts and the scent of her forbidden mate still clinging to her skin. Dante Romano barely made it through his bedroom door before his legs gave out. He slumped against the carved wooden frame, his entire body shaking with the aftershocks of what had just happened.
Mate.
The word echoed through his mind like a prayer and a death sentence combined. Of all the wolves in all the world, his destined mate had to be Lyra fucking Nightshade. The daughter of the Alpha who'd killed his grandfather in cold blood during the Crimson Night massacre. The princess of the pack that had been his family's sworn enemy for longer than he'd been alive. The most beautiful, fierce, incredible woman he'd ever laid eyes on. Dante. The sharp rap of knuckles on his door made him jolt upright. Your father wants to see you.
Now. Shit.
Coming, Rico. Dante forced himself upright and checked his reflection in the mirror. His usually perfect composure was shot to hell, hair disheveled, eyes wild, clothes wrinkled from his hasty retreat through the forest. But there was no time to fix it. When Salvatore Romano summoned you, you came running. The walk to his father's office felt like a march to the executioner. Every step echoed through the stone corridors of the Romano mansion, a fortress-like structure that had housed the Bloodfang. Alpha family for over 2 centuries. Portraits of his ancestors lined the walls, stern-faced men and women who'd led their pack through countless battles and blood feuds. None of them had ever faced anything like this. Salvatore looked up from the massive oak desk that dominated his office as Dante entered. At 62, the Bloodfang Alpha was still a formidable presence, silver-haired but powerful, with the same green eyes that Dante had inherited. Those eyes now studied his son with uncomfortable intensity. "You smell like enemy territory," Salvatore observed without preamble. Dante's throat went dry. "We had a brief encounter at the border. I made sure they knew not to cross again." "They?" His father's eyebrows rose. "How many?"
"2.
"A beta and—" Dante hesitated, then forced himself to continue. "The Nightshade princess." Salvatore went very still. "Lyra Nightshade was there?" "Yes, sir." "And you let her live?" The casual way his father asked the question made Dante's wolf snarl with protective fury. Let her live? Like she was some animal to be put down instead of the incredible woman who'd made his heart stop with a single look. "I saw no tactical advantage to starting a war over a border violation," Dante said carefully. "Tactical advantage." Salvatore leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "How very measured of you. Tell me, son, did you know that Connor Nightshade's daughter is still unmated?" "Not anymore." The thought hit Dante like a physical blow, followed immediately by the realization that he could never, ever say those words out loud. "I wasn't aware of her relationship status." "Well, she is. But not for long." Salvatore's smile was sharp as a blade. "Intel suggests she'll be mating Marcus Thorne within the month. The beta who was with her tonight, actually. Convenient timing." Dante's hands clenched into fists before he could stop them. The thought of another man's hands on Lyra, another man claiming what was his. "Which brings me to why I called you here," Salvatore continued. "I've decided to move up your mating ceremony with Isabella Reyes. 2 weeks from now, during the blood moon." The words hit Dante like a freight train. Isabella Reyes, the daughter of the Bloodfang Pack's most powerful ally. Beautiful, intelligent, completely suitable. And absolutely not his mate. "Father, This is not a discussion." Salvatore's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "The alliance with the Reyes pack is crucial, especially now. War is coming, Dante. I can feel it in my bones. And when it does, we'll need every advantage we can get." "What if I'm not ready?" Salvatore's laugh was cold. "Ready? You're 31 years old, and the future alpha of this pack. You've been ready since you presented." "I meant emotionally ready." The words slipped out before Dante could stop them. His father's expression hardened. "Emotion is a luxury we can't afford. You'll mate Isabella, you'll produce strong heirs, and you'll help me crush the Shadowmoon pack once and for all. That is your duty."
"Duty."
The word tasted like poison in Dante's mouth. "And if I refuse?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Salvatore rose from his chair, all 6'6" of him radiating lethal authority. "You won't," he said softly, "because you're my son, and you understand what's at stake. The Bloodfang pack has survived for over 4 centuries because we put family and pack above all else, including personal desires. What if there was another way? A path to peace?"
"Peace."
Salvatore's eyes flashed with something that might have been pain before hardening back to ice. "I tried peace once, boy. When I was younger and more foolish. Do you know what it got me?" Dante remained silent. He'd heard this story before. My father's death. My mate's miscarriage from the stress of the attacks. Years of bloodshed that could have been avoided if I'd just accepted the truth from the beginning. Salvatore moved to stand before the portrait of Dante's grandfather, the Alpha who died in the Crimson Night massacre. "There is no peace with the Nightshades. Only victory or extinction." The echo of Connor Nightshade's earlier words was chilling. "I understand, father." "Good. Then you'll be ready for your mating ceremony in 2 weeks. Isabella is a fine woman who'll make you a strong mate and bear you strong pups." Salvatore returned to his desk. "Now go." You look like hell, and I need my future alpha presenting a better image than that. Dante nodded and turned to leave, but his father's voice stopped him at the door. Oh, and Dante? Stay away from the southern borders for the next few weeks. I'm increasing patrols there, and I don't want any misunderstandings. The meaning was clear. Stay away from Shadowmoon territory. Stay away from Lyra. Of course, father. But as Dante left the office and made his way back to his room, one thought dominated his mind. In 2 weeks, both he and Lyra would be mated to other wolves. The bond between them would still exist, but it would be buried beneath duty, honor, and the expectations of their packs. Unless he did something about it first. Chapter 3. 3 days. 3 impossibly long days since Lyra had looked into Dante Romano's forest green eyes and felt her world shift on its axis. 3 days of pretending to be the dutiful daughter while her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin, crying out for her mate. 3 days of lying awake at night, his scent still haunting her dreams. She stood at her bedroom window now, staring out at the moonlit forest that separated Shadowmoon territory from the forbidden lands beyond. Somewhere out there, was he thinking of her too? Was he fighting the same desperate urge to run into the darkness and find her? A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Come in. Marcus entered carrying 2 steaming mugs, his golden hair catching the lamplight. In his casual clothes, jeans, and a dark sweater, he looked younger than his 28 years. Approachable.
Safe.
Everything Dante Romano wasn't. Thought you might want some tea, Marcus said, offering her one of the mugs. You've seemed restless lately. Restless. If only it were that simple. Thank you. She accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. Chamomile and honey, her favorite. Marcus paid attention to details like that. Lyra. His voice was gentle as he moved to stand beside her at the window. Talk to me. What's going on? For a moment, she was tempted to tell him everything. Marcus had been her friend long before their fathers decided they should mate. He was kind, loyal, honorable. All the things a future alpha female should want in a partner. But when she looked at him, she felt nothing but fond affection. No electric spark. No soul-deep recognition. No sense that he was the other half of her heart. Wedding nerves, I guess, she said instead. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, if you're having doubts about this arrangement, we could talk to your father.
No.
The word came out sharper than she intended. No, that's not. I'm fine, Marcus. Really. But she wasn't fine. She was drowning in a sea of impossible choices and forbidden desires, and every hour that passed made it worse. As if summoned by her thoughts, a familiar scent drifted through her open window. Pine and leather and something uniquely, devastatingly male.
Dante.
Her wolf surged to attention, every nerve ending suddenly alive with anticipation. He was close. Very close. I should get some sleep, she said quickly, moving away from the window before Marcus could notice her sudden tension. Of course. Marcus set down his untouched mug and headed for the door. Sweet dreams, Lyra. Fat chance of that. The moment the door closed behind him, Lyra was in motion. She threw on dark clothes, braided her long auburn hair back, and grabbed her leather jacket. Then she paused at her dresser, staring at the silver pendant that marked her as Shadowmoon royalty. After a moment's hesitation, she left it behind. The pack house was quiet as she slipped through the corridors and out the back door. Most of the wolves were asleep, though she could sense the night patrol making their rounds along the perimeter. She'd have to be careful. She'd have to be crazy. But as she shifted into her wolf form and padded silently through the forest, following that intoxicating scent deeper into the darkness, crazy seemed like the only sane option left. The old hunting cabin had been abandoned for decades, its log walls weathered gray by countless seasons. It sat in a small clearing that technically belonged to neither pack, a no-man's land that had been forgotten by everyone except the occasional deer hunter. Dante had found it 2 days ago while running patrols, and some instinct had told him this would be the place. If Lyra came looking for him, and God help them both, he hoped she would, this is where she'd find him. He'd been waiting for over an hour when her wolf emerged from the tree line. Even in her shifted form, she was breathtaking. Her coat was the same rich auburn as her hair, with silver markings along her legs and chest that seemed to glow in the moonlight. She was smaller than him but moved with fluid grace, every step radiating the confidence of an alpha-born female. Their eyes met across the clearing, and the mate bond that had been simmering beneath his skin for 3 days suddenly roared to life. She shifted back to human form without breaking eye contact, her naked body pale and perfect in the silvery light. Dante's mouth went dry. He'd seen plenty of naked wolves, shifting tended to destroy clothes, so nudity was hardly unusual in pack life. But seeing Lyra like this, vulnerable and beautiful and made his hands shake with the effort of staying still. "You came," he said hoarsely. "I shouldn't have." She reached for the spare clothes she'd carried in her teeth, jeans and a soft gray sweater that made her eyes look like liquid gold. "This is insane." Completely. He watched her dress, memorizing every curve, every graceful movement. "I've been going crazy for 3 days. Only 3 days? Her laugh was bitter as she pulled on her boots. "Try having your father lecture you about pack loyalty while your wolf is howling for her mate." Her mate. The words sent liquid fire through his veins. "Is that what I am to you? Your mate?" Lyra's hands stilled on her laces. When she looked up at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You know you are. I can feel it every time I breathe. Every time my heart beats. You're under my skin, Dante Romano, and I don't know how to get you out. Do you want to get me out?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Lyra rose slowly, closing the distance between them until she was close enough to touch. Close enough that he could see the flecks of amber in her golden eyes. "I want a lot of things I can't have," she whispered. Dante's control finally snapped. He cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the softness of her skin, the way she leaned into his touch like she'd been starving for it. "Like what?" His voice was rough with need. "Like this." And then she was kissing him. It was nothing like the careful, respectful kisses he'd shared with other women. This was fire and hunger and desperation all wrapped up in the taste of cinnamon and moonlight. Lyra kissed him like she was drowning and he was air, like he was the only thing standing between her and madness. Dante groaned against her mouth and pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. She was tall for a woman, nearly 6 feet, but he still had to bend down to kiss her properly, and the way she went up on her toes to meet him made his heart stutter. "Lyra," he breathed against her lips. "God, Lyra, what are you doing to me?" "The same thing you're doing to me." Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him down for another kiss that left them both gasping. "Making me forget who I'm supposed to be. Making me want things that will destroy us both. Maybe some things are worth being destroyed for." She pulled back at that, eyes wide and conflicted. "Don't say that. Don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder." Dante laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lyra, in 10 days I'm going to watch another man mate you. I'm going to stand there and pretend it doesn't feel like someone's ripping my heart out of my chest. How could this possibly get any harder? Because now I know what it feels like to touch you." Her voice broke on the words. "Now I know what I'm giving up." They stared at each other in the moonlight, both breathing hard, both trembling with the force of what had just happened between them. The smart thing would be to walk away, to pretend this had never happened and go back to their respective lives of duty and honor. Instead, Dante reached for her again. "Then let me give you something to remember," he whispered, and kissed her like it was the last time. Like tomorrow didn't exist, and there were no pacts, no feuds, no impossible choices. Just them, and this perfect moment stolen from a world that would never let them be together. Lyra melted against him with a soft moan, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him back with equal desperation. They stumbled backward until Dante's back hit the cabin wall, and then she was pressed against him from chest to thigh, her body fitting against his like they'd been made for each other. Which he supposed they had been. "This is crazy," she gasped against his mouth. "The good kind of crazy. There is no good kind of crazy when it comes to us." But she didn't pull away. Instead, she traced the line of his jaw with trembling fingers, as if memorizing the shape of his face. "What are we doing, Dante?" "Falling," he said simply. "And I'm not sure I want to be caught." A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the clearing. They froze, every instinct screaming danger. Dante's arms tightened protectively around Lyra as he scanned the tree line, his wolf's senses stretching out into the night.
There.
2 scents, moving carefully through the underbrush. One familiar, one unknown.
Shit.
"We got company," he whispered against Lyra's ear. She was already pulling away from him, her own wolf alert and ready. "How many?"
2.
"Maybe 3. Dante's mind raced through possibilities. Shadowmoon Patrol? Bloodfang Scouts? Random humans who'd stumbled onto something they shouldn't see? A low whistle echoed through the clearing, the kind of sound that could be mistaken for a night bird by anyone who didn't know better. Lyra went rigid. "That's Marcus."
Fuck.
Of all the wolves who could have found them, it had to be her intended mate. The one man who'd have every right to challenge Dante to a death match for touching what was his. Except she wasn't his. Not really. She was Dante's mate, chosen by forces older and more powerful than pack politics or arranged marriages. "Can you get him to leave?" Dante asked quietly, not without raising suspicions. Lyra's voice was tight with panic. "He knows I left the pack house. If I don't have a good explanation." Another whistle, closer this time. Marcus was getting impatient. "Go," Dante said, even though every instinct screamed at him to keep her close. "Meet him halfway. Tell him you couldn't sleep and went for a run." "What about you?" "I'll wait until you're gone, then circle back to Bloodfang territory." He cupped her face one last time, drinking in the sight of her golden eyes wide with fear and longing. "This isn't over, Lyra. It has to be."
No.
His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. "It doesn't." Before she could argue, he kissed her one final time, soft and desperate and full of promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Then he stepped back into the shadows, becoming one with the darkness. Lyra stared at the spot where he disappeared for a long moment, her hand pressed to her lips. Then she squared her shoulders and walked out of the clearing to face her future husband. But from his hiding place in the trees, Dante could see the tears streaming down her face. And he could smell the third scent he detected earlier, the one that had been watching them from the beginning. The one that was now retreating deeper into the forest, carrying the knowledge of what they'd witnessed back to whoever had sent them. Their secret was out. Chapter 4. "You're certain of what you saw?" Salvatore Romano's voice was deadly quiet as he stared at the wolf standing before his desk. Rico Martinez had been his most trusted scout for over a decade, careful, thorough, and completely loyal to the Bloodfang pack, which made his report all the more damning. "Yes, Alpha. Your son was intimate with the Nightshade princess. Very intimate." Rico's weathered face was grim. They weren't just talking. This wasn't some chance encounter during patrol. Salvatore closed his eyes and felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd raised Dante to be strong, honorable, worthy of leading their pack. But he'd apparently failed to teach him the most important lesson of all: never trust a Nightshade. "How long were you watching?" "Long enough to see them arrive separately. Long enough to confirm they'd planned this meeting." Rico hesitated. "Alpha, the way they looked at each other, this isn't some passing attraction. There's a bond between them." A bond. The words hit Salvatore like a physical blow. In all his worst nightmares, he'd never imagined this scenario. His son, his heir, mated to the daughter of his greatest enemy. Who else knows? "Just me. I came straight here after they left." "Good." Salvatore stood and moved to the window, staring out at the pre-dawn darkness. "Not a word of this to anyone." "Not yet." Rico nodded. "What do you want me to do about the situation?" What did he want to do? Salvatore's first instinct was to lock Dante in the mansion's basement until his wedding to Isabella could take place. His second was to contact Connor Nightshade and arrange for Lyra's immediate mating to her beta. His third was to kill them both and be done with it. But Dante was his son, his only child, and despite this massive betrayal, Salvatore couldn't bring himself to destroy the boy he'd raised and loved. Even if that boy was about to destroy everything Salvatore had worked for. Double the patrols along the southern border, he said finally. If they try to meet again, I want to know about it immediately. And if they do meet? Salvatore's reflection in the window looked older than his 62 years. Then we stop them. By whatever means necessary. Rico bowed his head. Understood, Alpha. Dismissed. As the scout left, Salvatore remained at the window, watching the forest that separated his lands from those of his enemies. Somewhere out there, his son was probably lying awake thinking about Lyra Nightshade. Probably planning their next meeting. Probably falling deeper in love with the one person who could destroy them all. Salvatore's hands clenched into fists. He'd lost too much to the Shadowmoon pack already. His father, his unborn children, years of peace and prosperity. He wouldn't lose his son too, even if it meant breaking Dante's heart to save it. You're lying. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless, as he stood in the doorway of Lyra's bedroom. She'd been trying to eat breakfast, but the eggs and bacon sat untouched on her plate, her stomach too twisted with guilt to accept food. Excuse me? She set down her fork with deliberate calm, even though her heart was hammering against her ribs. I said you're lying. Marcus stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. About last night. About where you really were. Lyra forced herself to meet his gaze. I told you, I went for a run. I couldn't sleep. A run. His golden eyes were hard as flint. In the opposite direction from where I found you.
Shit.
She'd hoped he hadn't noticed the discrepancy in her scent trail. Apparently Marcus was more observant than she'd given him credit for. I doubled back, she said. I was exploring the old hunting trails. The ones that lead toward Bloodfang territory. It wasn't a question. Lyra's throat went dry. Marcus. Don't. He held up a hand, his jaw clenched tight. Don't make this worse by continuing to lie to me. I can smell him on you, Lyra. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Lyra felt the blood drain from her face as the full implications hit her. If Marcus could smell Dante on her skin. I don't know what you think. I think you met with a Bloodfang wolf last night. I think you've been sneaking around behind everyone's back, putting yourself and this pack in danger. Marcus's voice rose with each word. And I think you're in way over your head. Lyra stood slowly, her wolf rising to meet the challenge in his tone. Careful, Marcus. You may be my intended mate, but I'm still your future alpha. Are you? His laugh was bitter. Because right now, you're acting like a lovesick teenager with no regard for the consequences of your actions. The accuracy of the statement stung. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Marcus stepped closer, his own wolf pushing close to the surface. Make me understand why you'd risk everything, your family, your pack, your future, for a wolf whose bloodline has been our enemy for centuries. It's not that simple. Isn't it? His eyes flashed with pain and anger. God, Lyra, do you have any idea what this could do to your father? To the pack? If word gets out that the Alpha's daughter is consorting with Bloodfangs. Nothing happened. The lie exploded out of her, desperate and unconvincing. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head sadly. We've been friends for 15 years. I know when you're lying. He moved to the window, gazing out at the forest beyond. The question is, what do I do about it? Terror shot through Lyra's veins. Marcus, please. You have feelings for him. It wasn't a question. This Bloodfang wolf. Whoever he is. She couldn't answer. Couldn't deny it without lying again. Couldn't confirm it without destroying everything. Jesus Christ. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. Lyra, do you realize what you're asking me to do? You want me to stand by and watch you throw your life away for a wolf who could never, ever be yours? I'm not throwing my life away. Aren't you? He turned back to face her, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable. In 8 days, you're supposed to mate with me. Create a future with me. Build a life together. But your heart belongs to someone else. The raw honesty in his voice nearly broke her. Marcus, I never meant. I know. His smile was sad and tired. That's what makes this so much worse. You didn't choose this. Neither of us did. He was quiet for a moment then. Tell me his name. I can't. Tell me his name, Lyra. She met his gaze, seeing the determination there. Marcus wouldn't let this go.
Not now.
Dante Romano. Marcus went very still. The future Bloodfang Alpha. Yes. Salvatore Romano's son. The heir to the pack that killed your grandfather during the Crimson Night massacre. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. Marcus sank down onto her desk chair like his legs couldn't support him anymore. Of all the wolves in all the world. I know how it sounds.
Do you?
Because it sounds like the beginning of another massacre. His voice was hollow. Do you remember what happened the last time a Shadowmoon and a Bloodfang tried to be together? That was different. Was it? Sarah Moonheart and Antonio Romano thought love could conquer centuries of hate too. They thought they could bridge the gap between their packs through their mating bond. Marcus's eyes were haunted. 43 wolves died because of their love, Lyra. Including both of them. The names hit her like physical blows. Sarah Moonheart, her great-great-grandmother. Antonio Romano, Dante's great-great-uncle. The star-crossed lovers whose secret affair had triggered the bloodiest night in both packs' history. This is different, she said again, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears.
How?
How is this different? Because we're not planning to mate in secret. We're not planning to mate at all. The admission tore at her heart. We both know it's impossible. Then why risk seeing him? Why put yourself through this torture? Because I can't help myself. Because when I'm with him, I feel whole for the first time in my life. Because the mate bond is stronger than duty or honor or common sense. I don't know, she whispered. Marcus studied her face for a long moment, then sighed heavily. You're going to see him again. It wasn't a question. Lyra started to deny it, then stopped. What was the point of more lies? I don't know, she said honestly. Lyra. Marcus stood and moved to her, taking her hands in his. His touch was warm, familiar, safe, everything Dante's wasn't. I'm going to ask you one more time to end this. For your sake, for the pack's sake, for the sake of everyone who could die if this goes wrong. And if I can't, then I'll have to make some very difficult decisions about what to tell your father. The threat was gentle but unmistakable. Lyra felt tears burn behind her eyes as she looked at the man who'd been her friend, her confidant, her intended mate. The man she was betraying every time she thought about Dante Romano. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. I know. He squeezed her hands gently. That's why I'm going to give you 24 hours to figure this out. One day, Lyra. Then I go to Alpha Connor. He released her hands and headed for the door, then paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I hope you find a way to be happy. Even if it's not with me. The door closed behind him with quiet finality, leaving Lyra alone with her impossible choice and the sound of her heart breaking. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. Dante had been expecting his father's summons since dawn. What he hadn't been expecting was to find Salvatore waiting for him in the family chapel, a small stone building that had been blessed by pack shamans for over 2 centuries. This was where Bloodfang Alphas came to commune with their ancestors, to seek guidance in times of crisis, to make the hardest decisions of their lives. You wanted to see me, father? Dante kept his voice carefully neutral as he entered the sacred space, but every instinct screamed danger. Salvatore stood before the altar, his back to the door. Candlelight flickered across ancient stone carvings that told the story of their pack's history, victories and defeats, births and deaths, the endless cycle of leadership passing from father to son. I had an interesting conversation with Rico this morning, Salvatore said without turning around.
Fuck.
Dante's blood turned to ice. He'd been so careful, so certain they hadn't been followed. But apparently not careful enough. Sir? He tells me you've been meeting with Lyra Nightshade. Now Salvatore did turn, and the pain in his eyes was like a knife to Dante's chest. My son. My heir. The future of everything I've built. Tell me Rico is mistaken. Dante looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw the plea hidden beneath the alpha authority. Salvatore wanted to be wrong. Wanted this to be some terrible misunderstanding that could be explained away, which made what Dante had to say next even harder. He's not mistaken. The words seemed to echo in the small chapel, bouncing off stone walls that had witnessed centuries of Romano confessions. Salvatore's shoulders sagged as if the weight of his son's admission was a physical blow. How long? 4 days. We've met twice. And Salvatore's voice was deadly quiet. And what? Don't play games with me, boy. Is she your mate? There it was. The question that would determine the fate of both their packs. Dante could lie, should lie, but something about the sacred space and his father's obvious pain made deception impossible. Yes. Salvatore closed his eyes and gripped the altar rail so hard his knuckles went white. Jesus Christ, Dante. Do you have any idea what you've done? I didn't choose this. No, but you chose to pursue it. Salvatore's eyes snapped open, blazing with fury and disappointment. You could have walked away, could have ignored the bond, married Isabella, and lived a good life. Instead, you've doomed us all. That's a bit dramatic. Is it? Salvatore's voice rose to a roar that made the stone wall seem to shake. Do you know what happened the last time a Romano mated with a Nightshade? The Crimson Night Massacre. I know the history.
Do you?
Do you really? Salvatore moved closer, his alpha presence filling the space until it was hard to breathe. Because if you truly understood what happened that night, you never would have touched Connor Nightshade's daughter. Dante's wolf bristled at the implied threat to his mate, but he forced himself to remain calm. Enlighten me. Antonio Romano and Sarah Moonheart weren't just star-crossed lovers, Dante. They were weapons, used by ambitious wolves in both packs who wanted to seize power. Salvatore's eyes were haunted. Their secret mating was leaked to extremists on both sides, wolves who had been waiting for an excuse to break the fragile peace that existed between us. That won't happen this time, won't it? You think your meetings with Lyra Nightshade have gone unnoticed by everyone except Rico? You think there aren't wolves in both packs who would love nothing more than an excuse to spill blood? The truth in his father's words was undeniable. Even now, there were probably Bloodfang warriors sharpening their claws and dreaming of revenge against the Shadowmoons. Just as there were Shadowmoon wolves who would celebrate the chance to finish what their ancestors started. So what are you saying? That love is impossible? That we should live our lives in fear of what extremists might do? I'm saying that sometimes love isn't enough. Salvatore's voice gentled slightly. I'm saying that being alpha means making sacrifices for the greater good, even when those sacrifices break your heart. Like you did. The question slipped out before Dante could stop it, and he watched his father flinch as if struck. What do you mean? Mother. Dante had never spoken about this, had never dared to ask the questions that had haunted him since childhood. But if they were being brutally honest, he might as well go all the way. She wasn't your true mate, was she? Salvatore went very still. Your mother was a good woman who gave me a strong son. That's not what I asked. For a long moment, the only sound in the chapel was the soft whisper of candle flames dancing in the still air. Then Salvatore sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. No. Elena wasn't my true mate. The admission hit Dante like a thunderbolt. What happened to her? Your real mate. She died. Salvatore's voice was hollow. Car accident when we were 25. I never got the chance to claim her. I'm sorry. Are you? Because you have the chance I never did, and you're throwing it away for political convenience. Salvatore's laugh was bitter. At least when I mated Elena, I knew I was doing it for the good of the pack. You're asking me to watch you mate Isabella while your heart belongs to our greatest enemy. The comparison stung because it was accurate. It's not the same thing, isn't it? You think I didn't love Elena? Think our marriage was just cold duty? Salvatore shook his head. I may not have had the mate bond, but I cared for your mother deeply. We built a life together, raised you together, found happiness even without that mystical connection the stories talk about. But you always wondered what it would have been like. Every single day. The raw honesty in Salvatore's voice was painful to hear. But I chose duty over dreams, and I never regretted it. Because sometimes being a leader means accepting that you can't have everything you want. And if I can't accept that? Salvatore was quiet for a long moment, staring at the altar where generations of Romano alphas had made their most difficult decisions. Then you're not ready to lead this pack, he said finally. The words hit Dante like a physical blow. Father.
I'm serious, Dante.
If you can't put the needs of our people above your own desires, then you have no business being alpha. Salvatore's eyes were filled with pain, but unwavering resolve. I won't watch you destroy everything our family has built for 3 centuries. Not even for love. So what are you saying? That you'll disown me if I don't give her up? I'm saying that you have a choice to make. And you need to make it soon. Salvatore moved toward the door, then paused at the threshold. Your mating ceremony with Isabella is in 7 days. If you're not ready to commit fully to that bond, to her and to this pack, then we need to discuss your succession. The threat was clear. Choose duty or lose everything. Dante watched his father leave, then sink down onto one of the wooden pews that faced the altar. Above him, carved stone faces of his ancestors seemed to stare down in judgment. What would they think of his situation? Would they understand the agony of finding his perfect match in the daughter of their greatest enemy? Or would they see him as a weak fool who couldn't control his own heart? The scent of old incense and melted wax filled his nostrils as he sat in the silence, trying to figure out how his life had become so complicated in just 4 days. A week ago, his path had been clear. Mate Isabella, produce heirs, lead the pack when his father stepped down. Now, everything was chaos. His phone buzzed with an incoming text. For a moment, his heart leaped with the hope that it was Lyra. Then he saw the sender's name and felt his stomach drop. Isabella, can't wait to see you at dinner tonight. Only 7 more days. Heartsuit. 7 days. 7 days until he stood before the pack and pledged his life to a woman who wasn't his mate. 7 days until he closed the door forever on the only person who'd ever made him feel complete. Unless he found another way. Dante rose from the pew and approached the altar, placing his hands on the ancient stone where countless generations of his family had sought guidance. The carved symbols seemed to pulse with old magic, connecting him to the wolves who'd faced impossible choices before him. Show me what to do, he whispered to the spirits of his ancestors. Show me how to choose between love and duty when both will destroy me. But the only answer was the soft whisper of wind through the chapel's stained glass windows, carrying with it the scent of pine and moonlight, the scent of home, and the scent of the woman he could never have. Chapter 6. The old cemetery lay in the neutral zone between pack territories, its weathered headstones marking graves that predated the blood feud by centuries. Here, under a canopy of ancient oaks, wolves from both bloodlines rested in eternal peace, ironic reminder of what might have been. Lyra picked her way carefully between the moss-covered monuments, her enhanced vision easily navigating the moonlit maze. She shouldn't be here. After Marcus's ultimatum, after her father's increasing suspicion, after the weight of duty pressing down on her like a physical thing, she should be home, preparing for her mating ceremony in 6 days. Instead, she was following a hastily scrawled note that had been slipped under her bedroom door midnight. Old cemetery. We need to talk.
D.
The smart thing would be to ignore it. To burn the note and pretend she'd never received it. But the mate bond pulled at her like a magnetic force, making rational thought impossible. She found him waiting by a marble angel whose face had been worn smooth by time and weather. Even in the darkness, Dante Romano was beautiful. All sharp angles and dangerous grace, like a predator carved from shadows and moonlight. You came, he said softly, straightforward surprise in his voice. I shouldn't have. But even as she said the words, Lyra was drinking in the sight of him. The way his dark hair caught the silver light. The way his green eyes seemed to glow with inner fire. The way her wolf purred with contentment just from being near him. I know. But I'm glad you did. Dante stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his intoxicating scent of pine and leather. Because I have something to tell you. Something that changes everything. Dante. My father knows. The words hit her like a physical blow.
About us.
About the mate bond. He's known since yesterday. Lyra's blood turned to ice.
How?
One of his scouts followed us to the cabin. Saw everything. Dante's jaw clenched with frustration. He gave me an ultimatum. Marry Isabella as planned, or lose my position as heir. And Marcus knows too. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. He confronted me yesterday morning. Threatened to tell my father if I don't end this. They stared at each other in the moonlight, both realizing that their secret was rapidly becoming public knowledge. How long before word spread to the wrong wolves? How long before extremists on both sides decided to use their bond as an excuse for war? There has to be another way, Dante said desperately. Some path that doesn't end with us mated to other wolves or our packs destroying each other. Like what? We've been over this 100 times in my head. There's no scenario where this works out. What if we ran away? The suggestion hung between them like a lifeline and a death sentence combined. Lyra's heart leaped at the thought. Just her and Dante, free from pack politics and ancient feuds. But her practical mind knew better. And go where? We're not just any wolves, Dante. We're future alphas. Our families would never stop hunting us. Then we make them stop. His voice was firm with sudden resolve. We force them to accept our bond.
How?
By giving them no choice. Dante moved closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. Lyra, what if we completed the mating bond? Right here, right now. Made it impossible for them to separate us. The suggestion sent shockwaves through her system. A completed mating bond was sacred, unbreakable even by death. If they joined their souls in the ancient ritual, no force on earth could tear them apart. It would also guarantee war. Dante, you can't be serious. The moment our packs discovered we'd mated, they'd tear each other apart. Would they? Or would they be forced to find another solution? His thumbs traced the high curves of her cheekbones. Think about it, princess. If we're already bonded, killing one of us kills both. And neither pack wants to lose their future alpha. You're talking about holding our own lives hostage. I'm talking about forcing peace through the one thing stronger than hate, necessity. His green eyes blazed with desperate hope. Our bond could be the bridge between the packs instead of the thing that destroys them. Lyra wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that love really could conquer centuries of bloodshed and mistrust. But the rational part of her mind kept circling back to one inescapable truth. It didn't work for Sarah and Antonio. Because they kept their bond secret until it was too late. By the time the packs found out, extremists on both sides had already decided to use their love as an excuse for massacre. Dante's voice grew more urgent. But if we're open about it from the beginning, if we force our fathers to choose between peace and losing their heirs, they might choose to lose their heirs. The possibility silenced them both. Was their love worth the risk of being disowned, exiled, or worse? Was the chance of peace worth gambling their lives? There's something else, Dante said quietly. Something my father told me yesterday. About his own mate. What about her? She died before he could claim her. Car accident when they were 25. Dante's expression was pained. He spent his entire life married to a woman he cared for but didn't love. Built a good life, but always wondered what might have been. The revelation hit Lyra like a physical blow. Salvatore Romano, the ruthless alpha who'd seemed incapable of mercy or understanding, had once been in love with a woman he'd never had the chance to claim. He doesn't want that for you.
No.
But he also doesn't want to watch me destroy the pack for love. Dante's laugh was bitter. He told me that being alpha means accepting that you can't have everything you want. Maybe he's right. Is he? Or maybe being alpha means fighting for what you believe in, even when the odds are impossible. Dante's hands tightened on her face. Lyra, I know this is crazy. I know the risks. But I also know that I'd rather die as your mate than live a lifetime without you. The raw honesty in his voice nearly undid her. Every rational thought told her to walk away, but her heart and her wolf were crying out for her to stay. To take the leap of faith that could either save them both or destroy everything they'd ever known. "If we do this," she whispered, "there's no going back. Once the bond is complete, we're tied together for eternity. If one of us dies, the other follows. I know. Our pacts might disown us, exile us, hunt us down and kill us both. I know. We could start a war that leaves hundreds dead. Or we could end one that's lasted 3 centuries. Dante's voice was soft but unwavering. "Lyra, I can't make this choice for you. But I can tell you that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're my mate, my other half, my destiny. And I'd rather face the consequences of claiming you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." She stared into his eyes, those beautiful forest green eyes that had haunted her dreams since the moment they'd first met. In their depths, she saw love and hope and desperate determination. She saw a future that might be brief, but would be completely, utterly theirs. "The mating ritual," she said slowly. "It has to be done under the full moon. Tomorrow night. In a place of power. Somewhere sacred to both our bloodlines." Dante was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his eyes widened with sudden realization. The Heartstone Circle. Lyra's breath caught. The Heartstone Circle was a ring of ancient standing stones that sat exactly on the border between their territories. Legend said it had been built by the first wolves to settle in the region, before the packs had split into separate bloodlines. It was sacred ground to both Shadowmoon and Bloodfang wolves. It was also heavily patrolled by both sides. "That's suicide," she whispered. "Maybe. Or maybe it's perfect." Dante's voice grew excited. "Think about it. If we're discovered there in the most sacred place to both our peoples, it becomes a religious matter as much as a political one. Harder for our fathers to simply execute us. Or easier to justify it as protecting sacred ground from desecration. There's only one way to find out." They stood in silence among the ancient graves, both knowing they were about to make a decision that would change the course of their lives forever. Above them, the moon was nearly full, its silver light seeming to bless their impossible love. "Tomorrow night," Lyra said finally. "Midnight at the Heartstone Circle. Are you sure?" She thought of Marcus, who deserved a mate who could love him completely. Of her father, who'd trusted her with the future of their pack. Of the centuries of bloodshed that had defined both their families. Then she looked at Dante and felt the mate bond sing through her veins like liquid fire. "I'm sure." He kissed her then, desperate and tender, and full of promises neither of them might live to keep. And as their lips met under the watching eyes of the dead, Lyra felt something shift in the very fabric of fate itself. Tomorrow night, they would either forge a new destiny or die trying. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The morning sun streaming through Lyra's bedroom window felt like an accusation. She'd been lying awake since before dawn, staring at the ceiling and trying to convince herself she wasn't about to make the biggest mistake of her life. In 14 hours, she would meet Dante at the Heartstone Circle. In 14 hours, they would complete the mating bond and change the course of both their packs forever. If they weren't killed first. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in." Her father entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, his weathered face creased with concern. "Thought you might need this. You look like you didn't sleep." "Wetting nerves," she lied, accepting the mug gratefully. The bitter warmth helped steady her hands, though it did nothing for the chaos in her mind. Connor settled into the chair by her window, studying her face with those perceptive golden eyes that missed nothing. "Want to talk about it? Where do I even start, Dad? How do I tell you that I'm in love with the son of your greatest enemy? That I'm about to risk everything, including your life, for a chance at happiness you'll never approve of?" "I keep thinking about Mom," she said instead. It wasn't entirely a lie. Thoughts of her mother had been haunting her all night. Connor's expression softened. "What about her? Do you think she'd be proud of me? Of the choices I'm making?" "Sweetheart, your mother would be bursting with pride. You're strong, intelligent, compassionate, everything a future alpha should be." Connor reached over and took her hand. Elena always said you'd be the one to lead our pack into a new era. The irony wasn't lost on her. A new era was exactly what she was hoping to create, just not in the way her parents had imagined. Did you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd been mated to someone else? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Connor's eyebrows rose. That's an odd thing to ask 5 days before your own mating ceremony. I keep thinking about choice, about destiny, about whether we really have any control over our own lives.
Ah.
Connor leaned back in his chair, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're wondering if I chose your mother or if fate chose her for me. Did you? Both. Neither. It's complicated. Connor stared out the window at the forest beyond. Elena and I weren't true mates in the mystical sense. But we chose each other anyway, and we built something beautiful together. Love isn't always about cosmic bonds and instant recognition, sweetheart. Sometimes it's about two people deciding to care for each other every single day. The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. Her parents' marriage had been arranged, just like hers. They'd found love through commitment and shared purpose, not through the mate bond. Maybe she could do the same with Marcus.
No.
Her wolf snarled at the thought, rising up in fierce protection of what was theirs. Dante is ours. Only Dante. But what if you had met your true mate? She pressed. What if fate had other plans? Connor was quiet for a long moment. I suppose I would have had to choose between personal happiness and my duty to the pack. And which would you have chosen? The pack. Always the pack. His voice was firm, certain. That's what it means to be alpha, Lyra. To put the needs of your people above your own wants. Even if it meant a lifetime of regret? Even then. Connor squeezed her hand gently. Because sometimes the right choice isn't the easy choice. And sometimes being a leader means sacrificing your own happiness for the greater good. The conversation felt like a knife twisting in her chest. Her father was basically telling her that he would have made the same choice she was rejecting. Duty over love, pack over personal desire. Which meant what she was planning to do tonight was not just reckless. It was selfish.
Dad.
Her voice was small, uncertain. What would you do if I did something that put the pack at risk? Something that went against everything you've taught me? Connor's expression grew serious. What kind of something? Hypothetically. Hypothetically, he said carefully, I'd hope that whatever choice you were making came from a place of love. For the pack, for our people, for the future we're trying to build. He paused. But I'd also hope you'd trust me enough to talk to me before making any decisions that could affect all of us. The opening was there, a chance to tell him everything. To confess about Dante, about the mate bond, about her plan to complete the ritual tonight. Her father was a good man, a fair leader. Maybe he'd understand. Or maybe he'd lock her in the basement until her mating ceremony with Marcus. Of course, she said instead. I'd never do anything to hurt the pack. Another lie to add to the growing collection. At this rate, she'd need a separate filing system. Connor studied her face for another moment, then nodded slowly. I know you wouldn't. You're too much like your mother for that. All heart and honor. He stood and kissed the top of her head. Try to get some rest, sweetheart. Big day in 5 days. As the door closed behind him, Lyra buried her face in her hands and tried not to cry. Her father trusted her completely, believed in her absolutely. And tonight, she was going to betray that trust in the most spectacular way possible. For love.
For Dante.
For the chance at a happiness that might last exactly 5 minutes before it got them both killed. Her phone buzzed with an incoming text. This time it really was Dante. Are you having second thoughts? She stared at the message for a long time, then typed back. Third and fourth thoughts. You? Every minute. But I keep coming back to the same conclusion. Which is that I'd rather have one night as your true mate than a lifetime as someone else's husband. The simple honesty of his words made her chest tight with emotion. Here was a man willing to risk everything, his birthright, his pack, his life, for her. How could she offer him anything less?
Tonight, she typed.
Midnight. No matter what. No matter what, he confirmed. She set the phone aside and rose from her bed, suddenly filled with purpose. If tonight was going to be her last night as Lyra Nightshade, future alpha of the Shadowmoon pack, then she was going to make it count. She spent the morning with her father, memorizing the sound of his laugh and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She had lunch with Marcus, trying to find the words to explain what she was about to do, without actually saying it. "You seem different today," he observed as they shared sandwiches on the pack house porch. "Different how?" "Peaceful. Like you've made a decision about something." His golden eyes were knowing. "Should I be worried?" "Probably." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Marcus set down his sandwich and studied her face. "Lyra, I care about you," she said quickly. "I want you to know that. Whatever happens, however this all ends up, you've been a good friend. A good man. You deserve someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved." "You're scaring me." "I'm scaring myself." She reached over and took his hand. "But sometimes you have to be scared. Sometimes you have to take risks that might destroy you, because the alternative is destroying yourself slowly." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You're going to see him again, aren't you?" She couldn't answer. Couldn't lie to his face one more time. "Lyra." His voice was gentle but urgent. "Whatever you're planning, please think about the consequences. Not just for you, but for everyone who loves you." "I am." She squeezed his hand. "But some things are bigger than consequences." "Like what?" "Like love," she whispered. "Like destiny. Like the chance to change everything." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head sadly. "I hope you know what you're doing." "I don't, but I'm doing it anyway." As the sun set over the forest, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lyra felt the weight of her decision settle over her like a mantle. In 6 hours, she would either be mated to the love of her life or dead by her father's hand. But for the first time in days, she felt at peace. Whatever happened at the Heartstone Circle, at least she would have tried. At least she would have been brave. Chapter 8. The Heartstone Circle looked like something from a dream or a nightmare. 7 massive stones, each twice the height of a man, stood in perfect formation under the blazing full moon. They were carved with symbols so ancient that most wolves had forgotten their meaning, but the power radiating from them was unmistakable. This was sacred ground. Holy ground. The kind of place where the veil between worlds grew thin and magic flowed like water. The perfect place for a mating ritual that would either unite 2 souls forever or get them both killed. Lyra crouched in the shadows at the edge of the clearing, her heart hammering against her ribs as she scanned for any sign of patrol wolves. The border between Shadowmoon and Bloodfang territory ran directly through the center of the stone circle, making this the most dangerous meeting place they could have chosen. It was also the most appropriate. She'd made it this far without being detected, using every skill her father had taught her about stealth and reconnaissance. Her wolf was restless beneath her skin, alternating between excitement at the thought of claiming their mate and terror at what they were about to attempt. "Where is he?" The question echoed through her mind as she checked the time on her phone. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes until midnight and no sign of Dante. Had he changed his mind? Decided that even love wasn't worth the risk of starting a war? A twig snapped behind her, and she spun around with lethal grace, her wolf surging to the surface. But instead of an enemy scout, she found herself staring into familiar forest green eyes. "You came," Dante said softly, emerging from the darkness like a shadow made flesh. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Despite her earlier doubts, seeing him here, really here, willing to risk everything for their bond, sent relief flooding through her system. "I hoped. But I wouldn't have blamed you if you decided this was too crazy." He moved closer, and she could see the tension in every line of his body. He was as terrified as she was. "Last chance to change your mind, princess. Are you trying to talk me out of this?" "I'm trying to make sure you understand what we're doing. Once we step into that circle, there's no going back. The mating ritual will bind us together for eternity." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "If our packs decide we're traitors, we die together." "I know." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, memorizing the sharp angles of his cheekbones, the way his eyes seemed to glow in the moonlight. "Dante, I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "Then let's do this before I lose my nerve." Together, they stepped into the stone circle. The moment their feet crossed the threshold, power slammed into them like a physical force. Ancient magic, older than both their bloodlines, older than the feud that had defined their families for centuries. It hummed through the air, making their skin tingle and their wolves howl with recognition. This place remembered a time when all wolves were one pack, one people, before pride and politics had divided them into warring factions. "Do you feel that?" Lyra whispered, her voice filled with awe. "The magic?" "Yeah." Dante's eyes were wide as he looked around at the towering stones. "It's like the earth itself is alive here." They moved to the center of the circle, where a flat stone altar waited. Carved into its surface were the symbols of the ancient mating ritual, interlocking circles representing the joining of two souls, surrounded by phases of the moon. "How do we do this?" Lyra asked. She'd heard stories of the old rituals, but the actual process had been lost to most modern wolves. I think we just trust our instincts. Let our wolves guide us." Dante took her hands, his fingers intertwining with hers. "The bond is already there. This is just making it official." Above them, the full moon seemed to pulse with approval, bathing the circle in silver light that made everything look ethereal, otherworldly. Lyra felt her wolf rise to the surface, not in aggression but in anticipation. "Mate," her wolf whispered. Finally, Dante's eyes flashed with the same inner light, his own wolf recognizing the moment they'd both been waiting for. Without speaking, they both began to shift, not completely, but enough to let their wolves partially emerge. Lyra's canine teeth elongated, her nails sharpening to claws. Her senses exploded with enhanced perception, allowing her to hear Dante's heartbeat, smell the unique scent that marked him as hers, see every detail of his partially shifted form. He was magnificent, powerful and wild and completely, utterly hers. "Lyra Nightshade," he said, his voice deeper now, roughened by the partial change. "I claim you as my mate, my heart, my soul. From this moment until the end of time." The formal words of the ancient ritual sent power crackling through the air around them. The stones began to glow with soft blue light, responding to the magic building between them. "Dante Romano," she replied, her own voice carrying the strength of her wolf. "I claim you as my mate, my heart, my soul. From this moment until the end of time." The world exploded into sensation. Power, ancient and wild, roared through both of them as the mating bond snapped fully into place. It was like being struck by lightning and embraced by warm sunlight at the same time. Every cell in Lyra's body sang with recognition, with completion, with the knowledge that she was finally, truly whole. She could feel Dante's emotions as if they were her own, his love, his joy, his overwhelming sense of rightness. Through the bond, she experienced his memories, the moment he'd first seen her and felt his world shift, the agony of knowing she was forbidden to him, the desperate hope that had driven him here tonight. And he was feeling hers in return. The loneliness she'd carried her entire life, suddenly banished by his presence. The fear and guilt over betraying her pack, overshadowed by the fierce certainty that this was her destiny. They were no longer two separate beings. They were one soul in two bodies, bound by love and ancient magic and the will of the moon herself. "It's done," Dante breathed, his eyes wide with wonder. "I can feel you. Inside my head, inside my heart." "I know." Tears streamed down Lyra's face, but they were tears of joy. "I can feel you too. It's like I was missing half of myself and didn't even know it." They kissed then, sealing the bond with physical touch. It was soft and reverent, and full of promises they now had eternity to keep. Around them, the stones continued to glow, as if the very earth was celebrating their union. For one perfect moment, everything was right with the world. Then the howling started. It came from every direction, north, south, east, west. The hunting calls of two separate packs, converging on their location with deadly purpose.
Shit.
Dante's voice was grim as he counted the different voices. That's at least 20 wolves. Both are packs. Lyra's enhanced hearing picked out familiar howls among the approaching chorus. Her father's deep bass, Marcus's urgent tenor, and others, warriors, scouts, wolves who'd been secretly watching and waiting for exactly this moment. "They know," she whispered. "They've known all along." Trap. Dante's eyes blazed with fury and betrayal. This was all a trap. But before either of them could move, figures emerged from the tree line. Connor Nightshade from the south, flanked by a dozen Shadowmoon warriors. Salvatore Romano from the north, with an equal number of Bloodfang soldiers. And at the front of both groups, the two alphas walked in grim synchronization, their faces masks of cold authority. "Step away from my daughter, Romano." Connor's voice carried across the clearing with lethal command. "Step away from my son, Nightshade," Salvatore replied, his own tone equally deadly. Lyra and Dante moved instinctively closer together, their newly forged bond making separation physically painful. Around them, the stone circle continued to glow, but the celebratory light now seemed more like a target. "Too late," Dante called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "We're already mated. The bond is complete." A ripple of shock went through both groups of wolves. Some snarled with outrage, others whined with distress. But the two alphas remained unmoved. "Then you've signed both your death warrants," Connor said with terrible calm. "The penalty for treason is death," Salvatore agreed. "Even for our own children." "Treason?" Lyra's voice cracked with disbelief. "We haven't betrayed anyone. We've followed our hearts, honored the mate bond that the moon goddess herself created." "You've allied yourself with our greatest enemy," Connor interrupted. "Shared pack secrets, compromised our security, put every member of our family at risk." "We've shared nothing but our love," Dante snarled, his wolf pushing closer to the surface. "We've kept our pack loyalties separate from our personal bond." "Have you?" Salvatore's smile was sharp as a blade. "Tell me, son, what did you discuss during your secret meetings? What information did the Nightshade Princess share about our defenses, our patrol schedules, our weaknesses?" "Nothing. We talked about nothing but us," Lyra finished, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. "They think we were spying on each other, using the mate bond as cover for espionage." "Weren't you?" Connor's golden eyes, so like her own, were filled with disappointment and rage. "Weren't you gathering intelligence for your precious Dante?" "No." The word tore from her throat like a howl of pain. "Dad, how can you think that? How can you believe I'd betray our pack? Because you already have." Connor's voice was flat, final. "The moment you chose him over us." The words hit her like physical blows. This was her father, the man who'd raised her, taught her, loved her unconditionally. And he was looking at her like she was a stranger, a threat, an enemy. So what happens now? Dante's arm tightened around her waist, protective and possessive. "You kill us both? Start the war you've been itching for." "No war," Salvatore said quietly. "Just justice." Both alphas stepped forward, their wolves beginning to emerge. Around the clearing, their warriors followed suit, the air filling with the sound of bones cracking and reshaping as 24 wolves prepared to shift. "Wait." The voice came from the edge of the clearing, weak but carrying enough authority to stop everyone in their tracks. An elderly woman emerged from the shadows, leaning heavily on a gnarled walking stick. Her white hair gleamed silver in the moonlight, and her dark eyes held the weight of decades. "Grandmother Elena?" Salvatore's voice was shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping you from making the same mistake I made 60 years ago," Elena Romano said, her voice gaining strength as she walked into the circle. "The same mistake that started this blood feud in the first place." End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The silence that followed Elena Romano's words was deafening. Every wolf in the clearing, alpha and warrior alike, stared at the ancient woman as she made her slow but determined way toward the stone altar where Lyra and Dante stood. "Grandmother, you shouldn't be here," Salvatore said, his voice gentler than Lyra had ever heard it. "This is pack business." "This is family business," Elena corrected, her dark eyes flashing with authority that transcended age. "And it's time the truth was told." Connor stepped forward, his own confusion evident. "Mrs. Romano, with all due respect, this doesn't concern your family history. My daughter has betrayed our pack by mating with your grandson." "Has she?" Elena's laugh was bitter. "Or has she simply repeated history? Tell me, Connor Nightshade, what do you know about the real cause of the Crimson Night massacre?" "I know that Sarah Moonheart and Antonio Romano's forbidden affair led to the deaths of 43 innocent wolves," Connor replied stiffly. "Including both of them. Do you? Or do you know the story your grandfather wanted you to know?" Elena reached the center of the circle, her weathered hand coming to rest on the stone altar. "The story that justified 3 centuries of bloodshed and kept both our packs from asking the right questions." Lyra felt Dante's confusion through their newly formed bond, his emotions mixing with her own growing sense of dread. Whatever Elena was about to reveal, it was going to change everything. "Speak plainly, old woman," Salvatore said, though his voice held more love than impatience. "What truth are you talking about?" Elena's eyes moved between the two groups of wolves, then settled on Lyra and Dante. "The truth is that Sarah Moonheart and Antonio Romano were never lovers. They were siblings." The words hit the clearing like a bomb. Gasps echoed from both groups of warriors, and several wolves took involuntary steps backward as if Elena's revelation was physically dangerous. "That's impossible," Connor breathed. "The records clearly state. The records lie." Elena's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "Sarah Moonheart was born Elena Moonheart. She was my grandmother, a Shadowmoon wolf who was stolen as an infant during a raid and raised by the Romano pack as one of their own." Lyra's world tilted on its axis. Through the mate bond, she felt Dante's identical shock, his desperate attempt to process what they were hearing. "You're saying Sarah was a Romano by adoption?" Dante's voice was hoarse. "I'm saying Sarah was a Shadowmoon by blood and a Romano by circumstance. When she and Antonio discovered the truth about her parentage, they tried to use that knowledge to broker peace between the packs." Elena's eyes grew distant, remembering. They believed that proof of shared blood, of family ties that transcended pack loyalty, could end the fighting. "But that's not what happened," Salvatore said quietly.
"No."
"Because there were wolves in both packs who profited from the conflict, who had built their power on maintaining the hatred between our bloodlines." Elena's voice hardened. "When they learned that Sarah and Antonio were planning to reveal the truth publicly, they acted. They killed them," Lyra whispered, understanding flooding through her. "They orchestrated their deaths and made it look like the tragic end of a forbidden love affair. Then they used the massacre to justify even deeper hatred, ensuring that no one would ever question the real reasons for the feud." The revelation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everything they believed about their family's history, everything they'd been taught about the necessity of maintaining the blood feud, had been built on a lie. "Who?" Connor's voice was deadly quiet. "Who were the conspirators?" Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Your grandfather, Matthias Nightshade, and mine, Giuseppe Romano, along with their closest advisors, wolves who saw more profit in war than in peace." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Both alphas stood frozen, processing the truth that their own bloodlines had been responsible for maintaining a centuries-long lie. "Why are you telling us this now?" Salvatore asked finally. "Because I'm 91 years old, and I'm tired of carrying this secret." Elena looked directly at Lyra and Dante, her expression softening. "And because I refuse to watch history repeat itself. These young wolves have found something real, something worth fighting for. They shouldn't have to die for the sins of their ancestors." "Even if what you're saying is true," Connor said slowly, "it doesn't change the fact that our packs have been enemies for 300 years. You can't erase that much history with a story." Can't you? Elena moved toward him, her walking stick tapping against the stone. Connor, your daughter has mated with my great-grandson. Not as enemies, not as spies, but as wolves chosen by the moon goddess herself. If that's not a sign that it's time to end this feud, what is? It's a sign that some bonds are stronger than politics, a new voice said from the edge of the clearing. Marcus stepped out of the shadows, his golden hair gleaming in the moonlight. Behind him came Isabella Reyes, the woman who was supposed to mate with Dante in 4 days. Marcus, what are you doing here? Connor demanded. What I should have done days ago. Marcus walked steadily toward the center of the circle, his eyes never leaving Lyra's face. I'm refusing to mate with a woman who's in love with someone else. Isabella? Salvatore's voice was shocked as he stared at the dark-haired woman beside Marcus. Why are you here? Because I'm in love with Marcus Thorne, Isabella said simply. And he's in love with me. We've been fighting it for months, trying to honor the arrangements our families made. But watching Lyra and Dante willing to die for their bond, it made us realize we were being cowards. Marcus moved to stand beside Isabella, taking her hand in his. Alpha Connor, Alpha Salvatore, I formally request permission to mate with Isabella Reyes. And I ask that you release Lyra and Dante from their arranged obligations. This is madness, Salvatore muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Elena asked gently. Or is it the moon goddess finally giving us a chance to heal old wounds? 2 pairs of true mates, connecting both bloodlines through love instead of hatred. Lyra felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at Marcus, her friend, her intended mate, the man who was sacrificing his own political advantage to give her a chance at happiness. Marcus, she whispered. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said with a rueful smile. We still have to convince 2 very stubborn alphas that love is more important than pride. All eyes turned to Connor and Salvatore, who stood facing each other across the stone circle. The weight of centuries pressed down on them, centuries of hatred, of bloodshed, of teaching their children to view each other as enemies. If we do this, Connor said slowly, if we allow these matings to stand, there will be wolves in both packs who see it as weakness. Betrayal. Yes, Salvatore agreed. There will be challenges to our authority, possibly attempts at rebellion. Are you willing to face that together? Elena asked, as allies instead of enemies? The 2 alphas stared at each other for a long moment. Then, slowly, Salvatore extended his hand. For our children, he said simply. Connor stared at the offered hand for what felt like an eternity. Then, with visible effort, he reached out and grasped it. For our children, he agreed. The moment their hands touched, a shockwave of power rippled through the stone circle. The ancient symbols carved into the altar flared with brilliant light, and for just a moment, every wolf present felt the presence of something vast and benevolent. The moon goddess herself, giving her blessing to the end of an old feud and the beginning of a new alliance. Around the clearing, warriors from both packs slowly began to lower their weapons, the immediate threat of violence fading as their leaders chose peace over war. But Lyra barely noticed any of it. She was too busy staring into Dante's eyes, seeing her own joy and disbelief reflected there. They'd done it. Against all odds, despite centuries of hatred and the expectations of their families, they'd found a way to be together. So what happens now? Dante asked, his arm tightening around her waist. Elena smiled, suddenly looking decades younger. Now you get to find out if love really can conquer all. And if it can't, Lyra asked. Then at least you'll fail together, Connor said gruffly. But there was warmth in his eyes as he looked at his daughter. Which is more than most wolves can say. As the 2 packs began to mingle tentatively in the stone circle, enemies for 3 centuries learning to see each other as potential allies, Lyra leaned into Dante's embrace and felt the future stretching out before them. It wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, wolves on both sides who would resist the changes to come. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly hopeful about what lay ahead. Because whatever came next, they would face it together. And some bonds, she was learning, were strong enough to change the world. Chapter 10. 3 months later. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been the Shadowmoon Pack meeting hall, illuminating the mixed gathering of wolves seated around the expanded conference table. Lyra still marveled at the sight, Shadowmoon and Bloodfang wolves working together, planning joint patrols and shared resources like it was the most natural thing in the world. Most days, it almost felt normal. Today was not most days. With all due respect, Alpha Connor, Thomas Blackwood said, his weathered face set in stubborn lines, this alliance is moving too fast. My scouts report increased tensions along our eastern borders, and some of our allies are questioning our new direction. Lyra felt Dante's tension through their mate bond before she saw it in the subtle stiffening of his shoulders. The past 3 months had been a delicate dance of integrating two formerly enemy packs, and Thomas, Connor's former Gamma, had been resistant from the beginning. What kind of tensions? Connor asked calmly, though Lyra caught the flash of concern in his golden eyes. The Riverside Pack is asking pointed questions about our defenses. Whether the Romano alliance has made us soft. Thomas's gaze flicked briefly to Dante. And the Crescent Moon Pack has formally requested a meeting to discuss recent developments. Requested or demanded? Salvatore's voice was deceptively mild as he leaned back in his chair. The distinction may be academic, Alpha Romano. Either way, they want answers. Lyra exchanged a look with Marcus, who sat beside Isabella near the foot of the table. The secondary couple had mated 6 weeks ago in a beautiful ceremony that had helped cement the alliance between their packs. But even their happiness couldn't erase the political challenges they all faced. What answers do they want exactly? Isabella asked, her dark eyes thoughtful. As the daughter of a powerful allied alpha, she understood pack politics better than most. They want to know if the Romano Nightshade alliance represents a genuine shift toward peace, or if it's a strategic merger designed to create a super pack that could dominate the region, Thomas said bluntly. And what's your assessment? Dante asked quietly. Thomas met his gaze steadily. I think they have reason to be concerned. Combined, our territories now encompass nearly 1,000 square miles. Our joint pack numbers over 300 wolves. From the outside, it looks less like love and more like conquest. The words hung heavy in the air. Lyra felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, the knowledge that her personal choices had far-reaching consequences for hundreds of wolves. They're not wrong, she said finally, earning startled looks from several council members. We are stronger together. The question is what we do with that strength. Lyra's right, Connor said, pride evident in his voice. We can't pretend this alliance doesn't change the balance of power in the region. But we can demonstrate that our intentions are peaceful. How do we do that without appearing weak? Asked Maria Santos, one of Salvatore's senior advisors. By being transparent, Dante suggested. Invite representatives from neighboring packs to observe our operations. Show them that we're not building an army. We're building a community. And if they're still not convinced? Thomas pressed. Then we deal with each challenge as it comes, Salvatore said firmly. But we don't apologize for choosing peace over perpetual conflict. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from patrol schedules to resource allocation. But Lyra's mind kept circling back to Thomas's warnings. Were they moving too fast? Had their love story inadvertently created a political crisis? As the council dispersed, Dante caught her hand and squeezed gently. Through their bond, she felt his reassurance and determination. We'll figure it out, his thoughts whispered through their connection. Together. I know, she replied, managing a small smile. Doesn't make it any less complicated. Lyra, Dante. Connor's voice stopped them at the door. A word. They turned back to find both their fathers waiting, expressions serious but not unkind. Is everything all right? Lyra asked. That depends, Salvatore said. How are you both handling the pressure? The scrutiny? It was a fair question. The past 3 months had been intense. Constant meetings, diplomatic visits, careful negotiations with dozens of other packs who viewed their alliance with everything from curiosity to outright suspicion. Some days are harder than others, Dante admitted. But we knew this wouldn't be easy. The question is whether it's sustainable, Connor said gently. You're both young, newly mated, trying to navigate not just your relationship, but the political implications of your bond. That's a lot of pressure for anyone. Are you asking if we regret our choice? Lyra's voice carried a slight edge. I'm asking if you need more support, Connor clarified. Both of you have been carrying the weight of this alliance on your shoulders. Maybe it's time to share that burden. Salvatore nodded. Your bond brought our packs together, but maintaining that unity is everyone's responsibility. Not just yours. The words were unexpectedly comforting. For weeks, Lyra had been feeling like every decision, every public appearance, every interaction with other packs was a test of their love story's political viability. Actually, Dante said slowly, there is something we've been discussing. Something that might help with the perception problem. What's that? Both alphas asked simultaneously. Lyra took a deep breath. We want to organize a regional peace summit. Invite all the neighboring packs to meet here, on neutral ground. Let them see for themselves what we're building. A peace summit. Connor's eyebrows rose. That's ambitious. And risky, Salvatore added. If it goes badly, we could end up with multiple hostile packs instead of just suspicious ones. But if it goes well, Lyra pressed, we could establish a new model for inter-pack relations. Show that cooperation is more beneficial than constant territorial disputes. Dante nodded enthusiastically. We're not asking anyone to give up their independence or territory, just to consider that we don't have to be enemies. The two alphas exchanged a long look, the kind of silent communication that came from months of learning to work together. It would take months to organize, Connor said finally. We'd need security guarantees, neutral mediators, clear ground rules, Salvatore added. So, you'll consider it? Lyra asked hopefully. We'll do more than consider it, Connor said with a slow smile. We'll help you plan it. As they left the meeting hall, Lyra felt lighter than she had in weeks. The challenges weren't going away. If anything, organizing a peace summit would bring new complications. But for the first time since their mating, she felt like they were moving toward something positive instead of just reacting to problems. Penny for your thoughts, Dante said as they walked through the territory that was no longer divided by invisible borders. Just thinking about the future, she replied. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be planning a peace summit with my bloodfang mate, I'd have checked them for head injuries. And now it feels like the most natural thing in the world. She leaned into his side, drawing comfort from his warmth and strength. Scary how fast things can change. Scary how fast the right things can feel normal, he agreed. They were interrupted by a commotion near the eastern border, raised voices, and the sound of multiple wolves in distress. Through their bond, Lyra felt Dante's immediate alertness as they both broke into a run. They found a crowd gathered around Rico Martinez, who was speaking rapidly to Marcus and Isabella. The old scout's weathered face was grim, and his clothes bore the dust of hard travel. What's happening? Dante demanded as they approached. Rico's been monitoring the Crescent pack, Marcus replied tersely. They're mobilizing. Mobilizing how? Lyra asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Rico's dark eyes were troubled as he met her gaze. Full military posture, Alpha. They've called in allies from 3 neighboring territories. Best estimate puts their combined forces at nearly 400 wolves. The number hit like a physical blow. 400 wolves was more than their own combined pack, and definitely more than could be justified by simple curiosity about their alliance. Do we know their intentions? Dante asked. Nothing confirmed, Rico admitted. But their alpha, Vincent Crescent, has been making speeches about the Romano Nightshade threat and the need for preemptive action to protect traditional pack structures. They're going to attack, Isabella said quietly. The question is when. Through the mate bond, Lyra felt Dante's mixture of anger and determination. 3 months of careful diplomacy, of proving that their alliance was about peace, not conquest, and it might all come crashing down because other alphas couldn't see past their own prejudices. How long do we have? She asked. Days, maybe a week, Rico replied. They're still bringing in reinforcements, but they won't wait much longer. Vincent Crescent isn't known for his patience. Then we need to accelerate our timeline, Dante said firmly. The Peace Summit, we call it now, emergency session. Dante, we haven't even sent out invitations, Marcus pointed out. Then we send them today. Make it clear that this is a choice. Come to the table and talk, or watch the region descend into the kind of warfare we've been trying to prevent. Lyra felt a surge of pride through their bond. This was the alpha her mate was meant to be, decisive, principled, unwilling to back down from doing what was right even when it was dangerous. It's risky, she said aloud. If we call an emergency summit and nobody shows up, we look desperate. Weak. And if we wait for the perfect moment while Vincent Crescent builds his army, people die, Dante replied. I'd rather look desperate than be responsible for another massacre. The reference to the Crimson Night massacre and the lies that had perpetuated their family's feud wasn't lost on anyone present. They'd uncovered one truth about their shared history. They couldn't let fear and prejudice create new tragedies. All right, Lyra said, decision crystallizing in her mind. We call the summit. Emergency session. 1 week from today. Every pack in the region gets an invitation. And if Vincent Crescent refuses to attend? Isabella asked. Lyra exchanged a look with Dante, seeing her own resolve reflected in his green eyes. Then we go to him. Because one way or another, this ends now. As the group dispersed to begin the frantic preparations for what might be the most important week of their lives, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a crossroads. Either their love story would inspire a new era of cooperation among the packs, or it would become the catalyst for the very war they'd been trying to prevent. Time would tell which legacy they'd leave behind. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. 1 week later. The Great Meadow had been transformed overnight into something resembling an ancient amphitheater. Concentric circles of benches faced a raised platform where neutral mediators, elderly wolves respected by all packs, waited to oversee what might be the most important gathering in regional pack history. Lyra stood at the edge of the meadow, watching delegations arrive from territories she'd only heard about in stories. The Riverside Pack, with their distinctive silver markings. The Mountain Crest Wolves, easily identified by their unusual size and thick coats. The Coastal Pack, whose wolves smelled of salt air and ocean storms. And there, arriving fashionably late with a show of force that was clearly intentional, came Vincent Crescent and his allies. 47 different packs, Marcus murmured beside her, consulting his tablet. More than we dared hope for. More than Vincent expected too, I'm betting, Dante added, his voice tight with controlled tension. Through their bond, Lyra felt his mixture of hope and apprehension. So much rode on the next few hours. Places everyone, Connor called softly. As the host alpha, he would open the summit, but the real test would come when individual pack leaders began to speak. They took their seats in the front row, the Romano Nightshade Alliance delegation, flanked by their closest allies. Directly across from them, Vincent Crescent sat with his coalition, his pale blue eyes fixed on Lyra and Dante with unconcealed hostility. Brothers and sisters, Connor began, his voice carrying easily across the meadow, we gather today not as enemies, but as wolves who share common interests, the safety of our packs, the prosperity of our territories, and the future of our children. Polite applause rippled through the crowd, but Lyra could feel the underlying tension. Too many of these wolves had been enemies for too long to simply set aside their suspicions. 3 months ago, Connor continued, my daughter mated with Salvatore Romano's son. Some saw this as a betrayal of tradition. Others saw it as an opportunity for peace. Today, we ask you to see it as something else entirely, proof that the moon goddess still has plans for all of us. Vincent Crescent rose from his seat, his weathered face set in contemptuous lines. With respect, Alpha Nightshade, pretty words don't change the reality of what you've created here. A super pack with a combined strength to dominate this entire region. I've asked for the floor, Vincent, Connor replied mildly. I believe protocol calls for. Protocol? Vincent's voice rose to a roar. You want to talk about protocol while you build an empire in the shadows? While you train your combined forces and expand your territory? Murmurs of agreement came from his allies, and Lyra felt her heart sink. This was exactly what they'd been trying to avoid, Vincent turning the summit into a trial where they were the defendants. May I respond? Dante asked, rising gracefully from his seat. The neutral mediator, an ancient wolf named Elder Catherine, nodded permission. Alpha Crescent, Dante said, his voice carrying the authority of his bloodline. You speak of expansion and empire building. Can you provide evidence of either? Your combined territory remains exactly the same size it was 6 months ago. We've made no territorial claims, conquered no neighbors, absorbed no smaller packs. Dante's green eyes swept the gathering. In fact, our patrol schedules and territory boundaries are matters of public record. Any alpha here can verify what I'm saying. Then explain your military exercises. Vincent shot back. The joint training sessions, the combined patrols. Standard cooperation between allied packs, Salvatore interjected, rising to stand beside his son. No different from the mutual defense pacts that Vincent himself maintains with the Ridge Runner and Forest Shadow packs. A ripple of laughter came from several delegations. Vincent's own alliances were well known, and far more militaristic than anything the Romano Nightshade coalition had established. This is different, Vincent insisted, but some of the fire had gone out of his voice.
How?
Lyra asked, standing to join her mate and father-in-law. Because it crosses old bloodline divisions? Because it proves that enemies can become allies. Because it threatens the natural order, Vincent replied. For centuries, pack boundaries have been sacred. Territory, bloodline, tradition, these things matter. You can't just wish them away because of some romantic fairy tale. The dismissive way he said romantic fairy tale made Lyra's wolf snarl with rage. She felt Dante's hand on her arm, steadying her through their bond. You're right, she said calmly. Tradition does matter. So let me tell you about a tradition Vincent seems to have forgotten. She moved to the center of the speaking area, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the meadow. 700 years ago, before our packs split into separate territories, all wolves in this region were one people. We shared hunting grounds, celebrated festivals together, intermarried freely between bloodlines. She gestured to the gathered delegations. The Coastal Pack and the Mountain Crest Pack, your ancestors were siblings. The Riverside and Forest Shadow Packs, your founders were mated pairs who chose different territories, but remained allies. Elder Catherine nodded approvingly. The young alpha speaks truth. I am old enough to remember the stories. So what changed? Lyra continued.
Fear.
Suspicion. The decision that differences were more important than similarities. Her eyes found Vincent's across the crowd. My question for all of you is simple. Are we brave enough to remember what we were before fear divided us? Pretty words, Vincent said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. But words don't change the reality of power. Your alliance has upset the balance. Has it? This came from an unexpected source, Alpha Sarah Coastal, whose pack had remained neutral in most regional disputes. Because from where I sit, Vincent, you're the one disrupting the balance. Calling up allies, mobilizing forces, threatening war over. What? A mating ceremony? It's not just about the mating, isn't it? Sarah's voice was sharp. Because that's what this comes down to. Two young wolves fell in love, and instead of celebrating the end of a centuries-old feud, you decided to start a war. Support for Sarah's position came from unexpected quarters. Alpha Michael Ridgerunner, one of Vincent's own allies, stood slowly. Sarah's right, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his years. I came here expecting to discuss the Romano Nightshade threat, but I've heard no evidence of actual threats. Just success stories about cooperation and mutual aid. Michael? Vincent's voice was shocked. You agreed that their alliance was dangerous. I agreed that change was unsettling, Michael corrected. But unsettling isn't the same as dangerous. And honestly, Vincent, looking at their numbers versus your mobilization, I'm starting to wonder who's really the threat to regional stability. The tide was turning. Lyra could feel it in the shifting postures of the various delegations, the murmurs of agreement that greeted Michael's words. Vincent had overplayed his hand, and the other alphas were beginning to see it. But cornered animals were often the most dangerous. You're all fools, Vincent snarled, his composure finally cracking. You think this is about love? About ending old feuds? This is about power, pure and simple. The Romano Nightshade alliance is the first step toward a regional empire, and you're too blind to see it. And what if it were? This unexpected question came from Dante, who stepped forward with predatory grace. What if we did want to unite all the packs under one banner? What if we believed that cooperation was better than constant competition? The meadow fell silent. Even Lyra stared at her mate in shock. This wasn't the argument they'd planned. Would that be so terrible? Dante continued. One pack, strong enough to negotiate with the human authorities as equals. United enough to protect our sacred grounds from development. Wealthy enough to support our elders and educate our young. Is that really the nightmare Vincent wants you to fear? It's the end of pack independence, Vincent replied, but his voice was uncertain now. Is it? Or is it the beginning of pack interdependence? Dante's eyes swept the gathering. I'm not talking about conquest or domination. I'm talking about voluntary association. Packs choosing to work together for mutual benefit. Elder Catherine rose from her chair, her ancient voice carrying easily across the meadow. The young alpha raises an interesting point. Perhaps we should vote. Vote on what? Vincent demanded. On whether the Romano Nightshade alliance represents a threat to regional stability or an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. Catherine's dark eyes glinted with something that might have been amusement. All in favor of designating the alliance as a regional threat, raise your hands. Lyra held her breath as she watched the delegations. Vincent's hand shot up immediately, followed by two of his closest allies. Then nothing. 44 other packs, and not a single additional hand was raised. And all in favor of recognizing the alliance as a positive development. Catherine continued. This time, hands rose like a forest of support. Sarah Coastal, Michael Ridgerunner, and dozens of others signaling their approval of the path toward cooperation. The vote is recorded, Catherine announced. 44 packs in favor of cooperation, 3 opposed. The summit recognizes the Romano Nightshade alliance as legitimate and beneficial to regional stability. The meadow erupted in applause, not polite, diplomatic clapping, but genuine enthusiasm for what they'd just witnessed. Vincent and his remaining allies sat frozen, clearly stunned by the complete collapse of their position. But Lyra knew better than to think it was over. Through the mate bond, she felt Dante's identical realization. They'd won this battle, but Vincent Crescent wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemies were the ones who had nothing left to lose. Chapter 12. 6 months later. The celebration had been going on for hours and showed no signs of slowing down. Tables groaned under the weight of food from a dozen different pack territories, while wolves from across the region mingled freely in what had once been unthinkable harmony. Lyra stood on the raised platform that had been erected in the center of the meadow, watching the festivities with a mixture of pride and wonder. The first annual regional pack festival, an idea that had grown out of the Peace Summit, was exceeding everyone's expectations. Penny for your thoughts, my alpha, Dante murmured, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Just marveling at how far we've come, she replied, leaning back into his warmth. A year ago, half these wolves would have killed each other on sight. And now they're arguing about whose grandmother makes the best apple pie. Dante's chuckle vibrated against her back. I'd say that's progress. Indeed it was. The months following the Peace Summit had seen unprecedented cooperation between previously hostile packs. Trade agreements, joint patrols, even inter-pack marriages had become commonplace. Not everything had been smooth. There were still traditionalists who grumbled about the changes, but the benefits of cooperation were becoming undeniable. Have you seen Vincent lately? Lyra asked, scanning the crowd. He's over by the beer tent, actually having what looks like a civilized conversation with your father." Dante's voice held a note of amazement. Who would have thought? Vincent Crescent had been the last holdout against the new regional alliance, but even he had eventually been forced to acknowledge its benefits. When the Coastal Pack had needed emergency assistance during a wildfire, the combined Romano Nightshade response had saved dozens of lives and countless homes. Vincent's own territory had benefited from the improved trade routes and shared resources. Pride was a powerful thing, but results were more powerful still. "Alpha Lyra. Alpha Dante." A young voice called out, and they turned to see Emma Santos, Maria's teenage daughter, bouncing up to the platform with the irrepressible energy of a wolf who hadn't yet learned to hide her emotions. "Just Lyra and Dante, Emma," Lyra said gently. "We've talked about this." "Right, sorry. Lyra, Dante, Elder Catherine wants to see you both. She says it's time for the ceremony." "The ceremony?" Lyra felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. Tonight, in front of representatives from every pack in the region, she and Dante would renew their mating vows in the traditional format, the one their emergency ritual at the Heartstone Circle hadn't allowed for. "Are you ready for this?" Dante asked softly as they made their way through the crowd. "To publicly declare my love for you in front of 300 wolves? I think I can manage." Lyra squeezed his hand. "The question is whether you're ready to be stuck with me officially. Princess, I've been stuck with you since the moment I saw you in that forest clearing. This is just making it legal." They found Elder Catherine waiting near the ceremonial fire pit, her ancient face creased with what might have been approval. Around the pit, representatives from each pack had gathered, holding ceremonial torches that would be used to kindle the sacred flame. "Are the candidates ready?" Catherine asked formally. "We are," they replied in unison. "Then let us begin." What followed was beautiful in its simplicity. No grand speeches, no political posturing, just ancient words spoken under starlight, witnessed by wolves who understood the sacred nature of the mate bond. "Lyra Nightshade Romano," Catherine said, using the combined name Lyra had chosen after their mating. "Do you take this wolf as your mate, your partner, your other half, to love and protect for all the days of your life?" "I do." The words came easily, backed by the absolute certainty that had guided her since that first meeting in the forest. "Dante Romano Nightshade," Catherine continued, using his own combined name. "Do you take this wolf as your mate, your partner, your other half, to love and protect for all the days of your life?" "I do." His voice was strong, unwavering. "Then by the authority vested in me by the moon goddess herself, and witnessed by the assembled packs of this region, I declare you mated in the eyes of all wolves." Catherine smiled. "You may kiss your mate." Dante's kiss was soft, reverent, full of promises they'd already begun keeping. Around them, the assembled wolves howled their approval, not the hunting calls of individual packs, but a harmonious chorus that seemed to make the very stars sing. As they broke apart, Lyra caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd. Connor and Salvatore, standing together with expressions of paternal pride. Marcus and Isabella, holding hands and grinning like fools. Even Vincent Crescent, applauding with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. But it was Elena Romano who drew her attention, the ancient woman who had changed the course of their lives with a single revelation. She stood at the edge of the circle, leaning heavily on her walking stick, but smiling with deep satisfaction. Lyra caught her eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Elena nodded once, then faded back into the crowd as if she'd never been there at all. "So," Dante said as the formal ceremony concluded and the celebration resumed around them, "what's next for the power couple of regional politics?" "Honestly, I'm hoping for a few months of boring domestic bliss." Lyra laughed at his expression.
"What?"
"After everything we've been through, normal sounds pretty appealing." "Normal is overrated," he replied, but his smile was warm. "Besides, I don't think we're built for normal." He wasn't wrong. Even now, there were plans in motion for expanding the regional alliance, establishing formal trade agreements with human authorities, creating educational exchanges between packs. Their love story had become the catalyst for changes that would ripple through generations. No regrets? Dante asked softly, the question they'd been asking each other for months. None. Lyra's answer was immediate, absolute. You. Only that we didn't find each other sooner. As the celebration continued around them, wolves from former enemy packs sharing food and stories and laughter, Lyra felt a deep sense of completion settle over her. Not the completion that came from achieving a goal, but the deeper satisfaction of knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger than ever after months of shared challenges and triumphs. Through it, she could feel Dante's contentment, his love, his absolute certainty that they'd chosen the right path despite all the obstacles. Dance with me, she said suddenly. Here? In front of everyone. Especially in front of everyone. Let them see what love looks like when it's not afraid to be seen. He spun her onto the makeshift dance floor that had formed near the musicians, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away. There was just the two of them, moving together under the stars, surrounded by the sounds of celebration and belonging. This was what they'd fought for. Not just the right to be together, but the chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of old hatred. The opportunity to show that love really could conquer all, not through magic or destiny, but through the simple choice to keep fighting for each other every single day. I love you, Dante whispered against her ear as they swayed to the music. I love you too, she whispered back. Forever. And as the moon reached its zenith above the meadow full of celebrating wolves, Lyra knew that some promises were worth keeping no matter what the cost. Some bonds were truly unbreakable, and some love stories were destined to change the world. 1 year later, the nursery was painted in soft colors that would work for any gender, sage green walls with cream trim, and hand-carved wolf figurines that had been gifts from packs across the region. Lyra stood in the doorway, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Dante assemble what appeared to be the most complicated crib in existence. You know, most wolves just use a basket for the first few months, she said, amused by his intense concentration. Most wolves aren't having the first child born to a unified pack, he replied without looking up from the instruction manual. This kid is going to have the best of everything. This kid is going to have parents who love them and a community that will protect them. That's all they really need. Dante looked up at that, his green eyes soft with emotion. You're right. As usual. He set down his screwdriver and moved to wrap her in his arms. How are you feeling? Really? Terrified. Excited. Impatient. Grateful. Lyra leaned into his warmth. Pretty much every emotion possible, often simultaneously. And the pack integration? Any concerns there? It was a fair question. The pregnancy had accelerated discussions about formal pack structure that had been brewing for months. Soon, there would be a child who belonged equally to both bloodlines, a living symbol of the unity they'd worked so hard to create. Actually, I had an idea about that, Lyra said. What if we stop thinking about it as integration and start thinking about it as evolution? Meaning? Meaning, what if we officially become something new? Not the Shadowmoon pack or the Bloodfang pack, but something that honors both traditions while creating space for new ones. Dante was quiet for a moment, considering. You're talking about a formal merger. New pack name, new traditions, new structure. I'm talking about acknowledging what we've already become. We haven't been two separate packs for months. We've been one pack with two sets of memories. Your father and mine would need to approve any formal changes. Actually, Connor's voice came from the nursery doorway. Your father and I have been discussing exactly that. Lyra turned to find both their fathers waiting in the hallway, expressions carefully neutral. Dad, how much of that did you hear? Enough, Connor replied with a slight smile. And for what it's worth, I think you're right. It is time to make this official. Salvatore nodded agreement. We've been calling ourselves an alliance, but we function as a single pack. The regional council recognizes us as one entity. Maybe it's time our paperwork caught up with reality. You're serious? Dante asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Completely. In fact, we have a proposal. Connor pulled out a folded document. Pending approval from both pack councils, we'd like to announce the formation of the Heartstone Pack, named for the sacred ground where your mating began this journey. Lyra felt tears prick her eyes as she read the proposed charter. It was everything she'd hoped for and more, a formal recognition of their unity, with leadership roles for all four of them and provisions for honoring both sets of pack traditions. The Heartstone Pack, she murmured. I like it. There's more, Salvatore said, his voice unusually gentle. We want to hold the announcement ceremony at the Heartstone Circle on the first anniversary of your mating ritual. Make it a celebration of everything we've built together. What do you think? Dante asked, though his smile suggested he already knew her answer. I think, Lyra said, placing both hands on her belly where their child grew, that this little one is going to have an amazing story to tell about how their parents changed the world. 6 months later, Alpha Lyra Romano Nightshade and Alpha Dante Nightshade Romano stood once again in the sacred circle of ancient stones, this time surrounded by the entire membership of the newly chartered Heartstone Pack. Between them, in a beautifully carved wooden carrier, slept their daughter, Elena Sarah, named for the grandmother who'd helped make their love possible and the ancestor whose true story had ended centuries of needless conflict. The stones glowed with the same otherworldly light they'd shown during that desperate midnight ritual, but this time the power felt peaceful, celebratory. Above them, the full moon blessed their ceremony with silver radiance. One pack, Elder Catherine intoned, her ancient voice carrying clearly across the gathering. One future, one legacy of love conquering fear. One pack, the assembled wolves repeated, their voices joining in harmonious agreement. As the ceremony concluded and the celebration began, Lyra looked around at the faces surrounding them, wolves from dozens of former pack territories, united now under a single banner. Children who would grow up knowing cooperation instead of conflict. Elders whose final years would be marked by peace instead of perpetual vigilance. This was their legacy. Not just a love story that had defied the odds, but a transformation that had healed old wounds and created new possibilities. No regrets. Dante asked softly, the question they'd shared so many times before. Lyra looked down at their sleeping daughter, then up at the man who'd been willing to risk everything for their bond, then out at the community they'd helped create. None, she said firmly. Only gratitude. And as the Heartstone Pack celebrated under the watching moon, Lyra knew that some love stories were worth every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of terror and doubt. Because the best love stories didn't just change two hearts. They changed the world. The end.